Good evening, students. I hope you are well. This is the discussion about the last part of this semester, and this is the case that you and your groups will be presenting. So without further ado, let's go to the website and talk about the resources that you'll need. So if you go to the website, there's a couple of things that we use as guides to help you to create the test, or excuse me, the case. So the two items here that I would like you to see and read are how to analyze a case and the formatting guide for the case study, the PowerPoints and the report. There will be no report. There will only be a PowerPoint. Let me first state that right now. You'll see that listed in your syllabus, but we won't. You will use or deliver to me a PowerPoint on your case. So I would like you to go in and read how to analyze a case, and I will be talking about that using some slides. And then for formatting, we'll come back to this. I'll show you about how to properly format the PowerPoint for your presentation. All right. Let us start by talking about the case method. Excuse me. So, how to analyze a case? So first off, why do we use cases? Where are simulations that are used now, computer programs that do pretty well. I'm still a real stickler on the case method, and you'll find a lot of people or a lot of teachers that are like myself as well. The case method gives you a chance to look at the present situation that is in organizations, and the organizations that you'll be looking at in the cases are inside your marketing strategy book, and these are real life industries and organizations at a critical juncture at their particular development. You'll do a systematic analysis of that, make recommendations that will produce a change in the results or the outcome. You'll have an opportunity through the cases to see how well you can address and assess a business's issues or problems. The role of the case is to provide you with the opportunity to utilize the knowledge you have gained at this point to evaluate, make recommendations, and hopefully enhance the performance of real organizations. You're going to take these cases as if you are a consulting group, you are individual rainmakers, and you're going to make recommendations to this corporation about where you see the major issues are and where they can go in the future. So we use an analysis framework or a standard format when it comes to creating or working on cases. So a framework is useful not only in analyzing cases in the textbook, but just considering any business situation that you might think of. So when we looked at that article that was in Business Week, most articles about companies and magazines are mini cases in themselves. And you can use the very same criteria that we used with the Business Week article to consider thinking about where the ultimate issues and the problems might be in any company or corporation. Without a framework, the analyst may overlook some issues. Quite simply, we many times just get caught speeding and we don't consider everything, the overall makeup of a particular problem. You might consider various effects various effects of the economic environment facing the organization at a given point. In other words, with a SWOT analysis, you look at the internal and external, the microeconomic and the macroeconomic, and you cover all four of those bases because it gives you the most complete picture that you have in where the issues might entail. The benefit of framework also is it's an ease of communication among your members as well. When everyone uses a similar framework, it gives each person an understanding, and you both have similar understanding and meanings. And the final benefit is it's a consistency of analysis. The framework is an excellent way to be able to diagnose problems or to be able to understand the current place where a corporation is and where their futures might go. And so, what are tips in going through this and working on your particular paper? So, when you get to the cases, the first thing I would do is read it 3 times. So, read the first time where you're just reading it as if it's to be read. And then in the second reading, begin to structure and classify the issues that you see as they appear. Remember to use a SWOT analysis. Remember to highlight things that you think are critical. And when you start putting them in the SWOT analysis, you'll start to be able to see a clear picture. A truly comprehensive analysis will generally take at least 3 readings. And it'll also give you a much broader ability to understand the case, because there are always things that you'll reconsider that third time around, believe it or not. There really never is a single answer to a case, just as that there's never a single marketing strategy that's appropriate for everything. Each case is unique. And what you must do is just be able to look at more than just the symptoms and dig deeper to try to understand the undercurrent of what's happening in the organization. Make an effort to put yourself in the shoes of the decision makers in the cases. So the first step is the situation analysis. And so the situation analysis is actually the last thing that's ever written. The situation analysis is a look at the organization's strengths and weaknesses with a SWOT analysis. With this, you want to be able to invest time in understanding the internal and external environments. And remember, strengths and weaknesses are internal, opportunities and threats are external. A strength, a fact can be a strength and a weakness. It could also be an opportunity and a threat. Remember, the main differences between a weakness and a threat are which one of these do I have control over? If it is outside of your corporation, in the real world, in the environment, and you have no control over those things, then they're either an opportunity or a threat. If it has to do with something internal in your organization, that it's either a strength or a weakness. So the next thing is, when you're going through the information, you're gathering it in a SWOT analysis, just remember that it is neither possible nor realistic for cases to contain all the information that a decision maker might wish to have available. This is where you start to do research. You research your particular corporation, and I want you to research it at that moment in time. And so, whatever the time is on that case, and the book was published around 2021, I want you to understand those corporations at that moment, and don't fast forward to 2025 to try to find solutions in the modern world. List any important information that is not contained in the case, considering the internal and external environment of the competitors and the industry at that time, and consider the information only in that particular time frame. Only a problem properly defined can be addressed. If you define the problem too narrowly or miss the key problem altogether, the subsequent framework steps will be off the mark. Remember that symptoms are not the problems themselves. The symptoms are the observable indication that a problem exists. If I have a temperature of 103.7, if I'm a good nurse, I'm going to treat the symptoms. But if I'm a good doctor, what I'm going to try to do is analyze and find out where the problem is occurring. That is the difference between a symptom and the actual problem. The symptoms are the observable indication that a problem exists. The problem itself requires depth and understanding. The most important question when you're trying to find out whether, what the issue is why. And so if I were to look at that problem of 103.7 temperature, the first thing I would ask is, why is their temperature up? That would make you dig into something, well, that the temperature showed up this morning. Why did it show up this morning? Well, it was from something that happened the night before. Well, what happened the night before? And you start to basically dig and delve and try to understand and be able to attain the information to be able to give a greater idea of what the problem is. The problem statement should be brief, usually only one or two sentences. It should be to the point, and it should provide a clear indication of what must be addressed in order to perform the the performance of the organization. Now, let me also say that it may not necessarily be more than one problem. You might find that there's major issues that are causing, you know, back and forth difficulties, and that realize that if you solve one problem, ultimately there may be another one out there that you may have to consider. So put together your SWOT analysis, look at the information, and then try to understand where the issues might occur. Realize is that there may not be any major smoking gun. You may have a few other issues that are causing the overall situation. Also, remember this, that if you're directing towards the future, you're wanting to provide them with a direction that will bring them to where they wish to be in the next 3 to 5 years. Not only being able to define where the issues are, but how to be able to fix those and use those as a future direction. You develop alternatives that have a reasonable potential to solve the problem. Now, let me also say this, and this is an important thing to understand. You know, you could think that the status quo is okay. All right. Um, However, you should do creative thinking, would come up with several true strategic alternatives. And remember that the strategic alternatives should look to the future, look to be able to provide some guidance where the corporation is going to go. And remember that you should include tactical thinking as well. And so, what I mean by that, what if your strategy goal is to be the number one maker of a particular software category situation in the next 5 years? Tactical thinking would be, what are the short range 1 week to 1 month tactics that help you move towards that particular goal? And so strategy and tactics are two different things. The tactics are basically there, short-term kinds of actions that are there to be able to achieve the strategy. The answers to tactical issues do not require major strategy, but tactical changes. And so you might also find some minor things that need to be alluded to in your particular case that you may need to make some small tactical changes. So I did the case on Swatch, which were the watch corporation Swatch, in all the myriad number of different kinds of watches that that corporation had. And one of the things that they talked about was the inability for salespeople in large retail establishments that sell other goods besides swatches or such as Rolex, you know, how do you get their salespeople to be more properly trained on their particular watches? That would be like a problem that's in the discussion, but it doesn't require a major change in strategy. A tactical answer to that would be give every one of those salespeople a watch, and that would basically embolden the salespeople to take a more greater investment in the particular watches that Swatch sells. And then the last thing is you develop those reasonable alternatives that have a reasonable potential to solve the problem. And remember, besides the status quo, use some creative thinking. Just remember those answers may be more tactical and may not require a major strategy change. So these are the cases that I would wish your groups to choose. All right. They are in the back of your book. They are Uber drives, Netflix fights, Apple bites, Starbucks blends, Google searches, and Walmart dominates. Now, I give your group the freedom. If you see another case that you would like to do, I give you the opportunity to try one of those. Okay? Okay. So, we've got an idea about the cases, we understanding of the case method. I want you to be able to go through this. And this also talks about the framework that I want you to be able to put together your particular cases. So remember the situation analysis, the assumptions of missing information, the statements of the problems, the development of alternatives, and the evaluations and recommendations. So what is the estimated time to complete a case? Well, there's no exact time frame in order to complete a case, and times are approximate. It would take at least, I would say, 30 to 90 minutes of dedicating reading to go through those one at a time, okay? Just remember also to become accustomed to making recommendations in the face of unknown economic or competitive conditions. You know, make sure your evaluation is thorough and that your assumptions are clearly stated and they're reasonable. So, what is the format? So, I will not require you to do a paper. Okay. So, this part in the document format, I do not care about. Okay. For the slides, I want you to make a 30-minute PowerPoint video. I wish you to be able to either present it live with all group members, or I will allow you to record it because I know many of you are out there, out and about, doing your jobs as you should. And so, how am I going to want you to do this? Okay. I want you to put to a PowerPoint together with these formats. Okay. First is the executive summary. The executive summary is a section on the critical issues faced by the company in the case, the recommendations for the company based on critical issues. The executive summary, by the way, is the first page of a marketing plan. For any of you who put together, involved in depth kinds of paperwork for your particular corporations, you know that most of the senior VPs will only read the front page. Well, that's what the executive summary is. The executive summary is a synopsis of the overall marketing plan. It should be an overview of the entire plan, including goals and objectives, the strategy, the implementation, the expected outcomes. Because the executive summary is a summation of the issues and the strategy, it should actually be the last thing you ever write. Okay? So think of that one slide at the beginning that is the executive summary, and you're going to basically come up with everything right there at that first slide. So the next section is the overview. I want you to provide a brief history of the company that is described in the case. This will require you to go out and do some research. Remember, any research that you do, I wish you to provide the sources in the bibliography. All right. Give me a brief history describing the case, include information provided from outside research. Describe also the critical issues at this point that need to be addressed in the plan. Include any major issues that require substantial resources and whatever minor issues that the policy changes can remedy. The next, I want you to do an in-depth analysis of using a SWOT, all right? Your SWOT analysis will contain the strengths that enable the firm to meet their needs. The strengths, remember, can be both physical and intellectual. And how do those strengths differentiate them from the firms in which they compete with? The weaknesses are how do those weaknesses prevent the firm from fulfilling their customer needs? And how do those weaknesses negatively differentiate the firm from their competitors? Remember, opportunities are external and independent of this firm and not strategic options. So, in other words, if there is a growing market for a particular thing, that is basically external from the corporation and need to be stated. And how are these opportunities related to serving their needs, and what is the time frame or the horizon for each opportunity? Finally, with threats, we have to think to ourselves, what can put us out of business tomorrow that we have no ability to affect? And how are these threats related to serving or failing to serve customer needs? And what is the time frame for each of the threat? The next section is defining the competitive advantage. What is the unique thing about each one of these firms that makes them special? What is it about Uber? What is the core essence of what Uber does? And remember this, it is not the physical things that the company does, but what they provide that creates value. Remember, Theodore Levitt said, when customers go into a hardware store, they're not looking for a quarter-inch drill. They're looking for a quarter-inch hole. And so think about what is the essence of Uber? What does it bring? What is the unique part of what Netflix provides that is different from their competitors? What is the special part of Apple that creates such customer loyalty? And I'm going to tell you this, it has nothing to do with the equipment. What is the thing that draws people to Starbucks? And what is the particular thing that Google has as its advantages? And also remember this, finally, Walmart dominates. What is the essence that Walmart brings to every customer? And realize that all of those strengths in one way or another could be confounded as weaknesses. And so when you're developing the competitive advantage for any of these cases, I want you to think, about, well, how do you describe what the firm does that you can match their strengths with the opportunities to be able to create capabilities to serve those customer needs. Think about the capabilities and your competitive advantages. Are they based upon operational excellence? Are they based on product leadership or customer intimacy? Think about those things that we talked about or talked about in your recordings. How are those capabilities and advantage made apparent to customers? Can you convert the weaknesses into strengths or the strengths into opportunities? And how can the firm minimize the weaknesses and threats that they cannot fix? Are there any major liabilities that are connected or limitations that the corporation has? Are they apparent to our customers? And then finally, can the firm do anything about these liabilities or limitations, especially those that impact the firm's ability to serve customer needs? Now, given our understanding of what is unique in relationship to our SWOT analysis, when we're coming up with the issues, now we start coming up with a strategic focus. What is the overall focus of the marketing plan? What is our plan, our strategy? What is our direction? Are we going to be aggressive? Are we going to be diversified? Are we required to create a turnaround in this business? Have we gone to that point? Are we going to be just simply defensive, or are we also going to focus in a particular niche? Once we decide that, describe the firm's focus in terms of the strategy canvas. And so, how does the firm's strategic thrust provide focus and divergence from other companies? Because remember, it is not where we are similar to other corporations. It is how we are different. And so we want to be able to look at the differences, because the differences help us to position our corporation relative to the competition in the consumer's mind. And then finally, our goals. Our goals are broad, they're motivational, they may be vague, speak to being number one in the industry in the next 5 years. But the objectives in the marketing plan are the concrete goals to achieve those steps. Objectives are specific and measurable outcomes, and there is a time frame for completion. And so we are wanting you to put together those particular things. And then at the end, I want you to conclude with your objectives, your estimated time frame, and a measure for success or failure. And that is how you will end everything. Okay, what are some of the last things or some tips to help you along the way? Let's go over a few of them before we end. Here we go. Okay, so here's some hints. Just remember, no one can analyze a case after reading it only one time, or even worse, doing the analysis after the first reading. Don't get trapped into thinking the answer to the case is hidden somewhere in the case text. Sometimes there may not be a big answer, but there actually might be. And so I guess part of what I'm saying there is, don't presuppose, just read and think, okay? And the last thing is to make your effort to put yourself in the shoes of the decision makers of that particular case. The next is, remember to organize your information into useful topic blocks. Use the SWOT analysis. Remember, and I would do this after you've read through it first times. This is when I would start building your SWOT analysis. You might ask each group member to build their own and then bring them all together. A factor can be a strength and a weakness, or an opportunity and a threat. And there's a tendency to confuse opportunities with possibilities. An opportunity comes from the outside, but it is not a possibility within your organization. Look at the case at the time the situation actually took place. Using more recent information can bias your strategy recommendations and conclusions, because you never know, they may have gotten it wrong. So put yourself in the time frame of your particular case. List the important information not contained in the case. And why might that information be useful? and how you might go about acquiring it. Research, all right? And also remember, the more research you do, the higher grade you get, because one of the things I'm wanting to look for is a good bibliography at the end. Remember that internal records will contain much of the needed strength and weakness information, internal ones, such as employee turnover or sales levels. The quality of your analysis finally will depend on the coverage of the framework, the depth of your analysis, and the degree in which you can defend your recommendations. Dig, find as much information as you can, and understand some you'll have to throw away, but there will always be a nugget that you'll need to keep. Remember, only a problem properly defined can be addressed. And remember, symptoms are not a problem of themselves. And remember, the most important question in the identification is why. And remember, problem well defined is a problem half solved. Define your problems well. Think about them. When you develop a set of alternatives, remember that they have to have a reasonable potential for solving the problems, which means that if it is a big problem, you can't use a small solution. And remember always that the small issues can be addressed in a tactical way, but the big issues will require a long-term strategic focus. One alternative is always the status quo. You understand that this is not a means of avoiding a decision. If it's recommended as a next step, you're making a conscious decision based upon evaluation. All right. You're not deciding to not decide. You are making a decision based upon a conscious effort that you think the status quo is the best thing that you can do. And then finally, use creative thinking to come up with truly strategic alternatives. And remember, when you evaluate alternatives, how well does the alternative address the problem or issues that are stated in step 3? Remember that the consistency of whatever alternative they must be consistent with your corporation's mission statement. And does it assist in achieving the plan's stated goals and objectives? Remember, how well do the alternatives coincide with the SWOT findings in step 1? Does it address what you found in the SWOT? Finally, as I stated before, become accustomed with making recommendations in the face of unknown economic or competitive conditions. And as long as your evaluation is thorough and your assumptions are clearly stated, your recommendations will be justified. So, the last stuff about the case. 30 minutes maximum, no longer than 30 minutes. Brevity is the soul of wit. On the day that you are scheduled to present, you can either record it or present it live, but I want all members to be a part of the case. So it means that each group member will take one section that they themselves will do. Excuse me, I'm sorry. It means that each member will do one presentation. And if all your members cannot show up, then I will accept a recording in which all 4 members contribute. All right. It also means this is that the day of the presentation, I would like whatever group members can be there to be there while I watch. Okay. All right. So this is the end. And if you have any issues that you would like to talk about, any discussion that you feel I did not give you enough information on, or any questions whatsoever, please do not hesitate to talk to me. If you as a group would like to email me and have a discussion, I'm all for that. What's your next step? Your next step is to get with your group members and decide which case you want. First come, first served. And so if one of your particular groups is really serious about a particular one of those, then come to me as quickly as you can and I will reserve that. Okay. All right. Thank you for your patience while I've gone through this. I appreciate it very much. Please email me or text me with anything that any issues that you have that need to be addressed. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Good luck. And I'll see you when you present.